everybody. Happy Hell-o-ween. It's going to be a great live stream. I know way too much about this stuff. And right out the gates, I want to say, I'm not a left-hand path magician. I'm not Luciferian. I'm not a Satanist. However, I studied this stuff from a ridiculously young age. I mean, I was like really, really young. And eventually in this live stream, just so you guys know, and if you can't stick around for the whole thing, later I'll put chapters in the description so you can find the stuff. Yeah, my partner made the horns for me. Isn't that awesome? I was really surprised at how nice they came out. And here in Ecuador, man, we could not find any masks, or it's very Catholic and not down. So I am going to go out in public like this later. Okay, so let's stay on track here. We're going to talk about mistranslations from the Hebrew in Genesis that will blow your mind. We're going to talk about the tetragrammaton, the pentagrammaton. We're going to talk about various names of God. We're going to talk about some interpretations in mainstream Christianity that are literally the opposite of what the Bible actually describes. But probably the most interesting, and honestly, I almost hesitate to do this because when we get into the Gnostic metaphysical interpretation of the Lucifer myth as a process, an energetic process, it's the most profound and deep secrets of the Western occult. Like, it's one of the most important things I feel like I've learned. So I feel like I'm going to give you guys kind of the best of what my channel has to offer, and then I'm going to have to figure out how to top it later, because it really is, this is like a best of thing, yeah, we're going to get into the metaphysics of Gnosticism. We're going to talk about an ayahuasca vision I had where Pachamama actually explained to me what the archangels really were, which was really interesting. I actually got this glorious display of the creation, the moment of creation, and how everything divided into geometries. And it also explained to me what twin flames really are. And excuse me if I have it wrong relative to pop culture, because I've never even looked it up. It's just this idea of one soul dividing and then that process replicating, right? But I don't want to blow it too soon. So let me talk a little bit about my personal history and why it is that I became sort of like a amateur Bible scholar, even though I'm not Christian, and why it is that I know so much about this stuff. I grew up in the Deep South. It was a very, very Christian place, and a lot of ignorance, a lot of violence. And I wasn't Christian. I was a very philosophical child. And I was also extremely intelligent. According to my grandmother, I was reading safari cards to her, which were these cards with animals, and then there was information on the back. And she said that I would read the entire box to her over the phone at 4.5. So I was a fluent reader by the time I was 5. And according to my mom, the first time she heard me use profanity, I was 5 years old. And I had asked my father something about God. They were not Christian, but they didn't know what to do, I think. So my grandmother just gave me a Bible because she knew I could read. And my mom said that maybe a week later, I came and handed it to her and said, "This is bullshit." And so a little bit later, maybe in second or third grade, I think a girl on the playground invited me to go to church with her family. And I said, "Well, I'm not Christian." And sure, her eyes got really big. She said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God." And she said, "Well, you don't believe in God?" And I said, "Well, I sort of do, but this isn't just you don't have to just believe in Christianity or you don't believe in God." And she said, "Oh yeah. In fact, my daddy says that if you don't believe in Jesus, that makes you a Satanist." And even as an 8 or 9-year-old, somehow I had the presence of mind to try to explain to this kid that if I didn't believe in the entire religion, I also wasn't a Satanist. But of course, this went around the playground, and I was ostracized and bullied and attacked and jumped. And this went on for, my mom actually moved me to a different school over not being Christian, right? And I always had this kind of intuitive understanding of a lot of the archaic symbols like the pentagram in particular. And very, very early, I started to, I understood that Christianity had been used to mold people into this sheeple kind of, to make people submissive and conform. And I also suspected that the demonization of symbols like the pentagram were actually intentional, that these were symbols of power somehow, and that they were trying to disconnect people from this ancient knowledge that we once all had. As the great Freemason Albert Pike wrote, man had the truth, but he found error, which was, a cryptic way of saying that we used to all kind of know where we came from, and we had the truth and we found error. And so shortly after this encounter with the Christian girl on the playground and getting moved to a different school, I was in this store called Spencer's, which was kind of like an adult novelty gift thing. I don't know what I was doing in there. I probably went with my mom or something, and I saw a little black book called the Satanic Bible by Anton Szandor LaVey. And so it kind of occurred to me that if Christianity was the problem, whatever the antinomy was probably the solution. And so I bought the book, and coincidentally, I had started actually going to church. We were very, very poor. We didn't even have a toilet in our house or bullet holes in the window. It was insane. Our neighbors were inbred. I watched my babysitter shoot it, or a guy that was beating her brother to death with a lead pipe when I was like 9. It was insane. White trash Christian, right? But we were very poor, is the point. And so the Salvation Army Church would take the poor kids to amusement parks and to the beach, and they would pay for our hotel rooms. And there were also a lot of trailer park girls. And so, I wanted to go meet girls. I think I was like 11 or something. And this was just becoming interesting to me. And I would actually sit in the chapel and read the Satanic Bible during the sermon. And I was also struck by the fact that, no, the Satanic verses were not Aleister Crowley. That was written by that Russian guy. I can't remember his name. He got in a lot of trouble, though. People were really pissed off about that. So that was basically my introduction to this. And after that, I got into other systems like Wicca, until I discovered that Harold Gardner had actually just plagiarized Aleister Crowley, and that there was no coven of witches, and that the whole thing was just a total farce, basically. Over the years, it's not like something that I really obsessed about. It's like I had this really early contact with it. And then I probably in junior high school, it came into my attention again. I'm not sure why. I think I just started studying all the different mysticisms, or religions, Buddhism. I became interested in psychoactive plants very, very early, and I noticed that the Christians had also demonized the use of these plants and had killed people over it. Yeah, right on. But I do wonder what it. Well, we'll talk about Crowley and all that in a minute. Okay, so let's get into what happened to the Gnostics and how they got in trouble, because really the main focus of this live stream is the Gnostic interpretation of Lucifer and the serpent in particular. Someone noticed that the serpent actually told the truth in the Garden of Eden. That Jehovah, who, by the way, I should talk about these misinterpretations first while we're in the book of Genesis. Elohim is actually a masculine form of a feminine plural, which implies an androgynous being, or maybe a group of beings. In some of the other Jewish mystical works, actually, like Moshe, he wants to know which Elohim he's meeting with. And when it was translated to English, Elohim, the Tetragrammaton, which is just the Yod He, Vav He, they also represent the 4 elements. It's also why we're not supposed to say 4-letter words, because it is said that if you were able to pronounce the Tetragrammaton, it would destroy the universe. And so shit, fuck, piss, damn, all of these 4-letter words are the origin of that is actually that you're not supposed to say the Tetragrammaton, which is hilarious because I was on YouTube earlier and there are all these videos where people are trying to like tell you how you should say the Tetragrammaton. But that's where we get Jehovah, Yahweh, or Yahweh is another translation of it. Sometimes it's actually referred to as the Shekinah, which is the feminine aspect of God in Jewish mysticism. So everywhere throughout Genesis, they just changed it to Jehovah or Him or God. And in reality, so right away, man, as soon as we get into Genesis, the people that believe the Bible is the literal truth, you're not reading anything that really has anything to do with what is written in Hebrew, right? And Hebrew, by the way, is an extraordinary language. Every letter is also like a pictograph or a hieroglyph, I guess. I don't know what the right word would be, but a picture. So it represents something. It's also number, and then it's a sound. And really interesting for me is that the Hebrew creation mythos is basically that the universe was created by these 22 letters or vibrations. The tradition that I'm studying now here in the Amazon with the Shuar, they believe the same thing, that there were these sounds that manifested the, thank you, that manifested the universe, which is pretty incredible. It's actually one of the practices of scientific illuminism. One of the mystery traditions is that you look for these disconnected traditions that have similarities, and then these things are assumed to have some kind of objective reality or some significance. So just a little bit more about the Tetragrammaton, because this is incredible. This is one of the most mind-blowing things. Hebrew is interesting in that I've always felt that like when an artist is able to write like lyrics that you can interpret on multiple levels, or the Book of Lies by Aleister Crowley, that every single time you read it, if you read it, put it down for 6 months, pick it up again, you'll just all these new layers, and it doesn't ever seem to stop. And to me, that's always been like a sign that there's divinity embedded in the Gimel is a camel. Yep. Okay, so the Tetragrammaton, remember, it represents the 4 elements and a whole bunch of other stuff. But the letter Shin in Hebrew, it represents fire, but also like spiritual fire. If you place the letter Shin in the center of the Tetragrammaton, it becomes the Pentagrammaton, and it is pronounced Yoshua, which is Savior. That was actually demonstrated to me in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Stella Matutina, and man, it's like, wow, that is just something else. Also, while we're on the subject, man, when I was talking about how these symbols have been demonized, not only did the Christians use the pentagram to identify each other until the 3rd century, the first 300 years, what it symbolizes actually is with the point going up, or one of the things. I mean, it symbolizes a lot. It's a very important symbol, but it symbolizes the redintegration of matter back into spirit, because it's like spirit crystallized when nothing had a thought, and we'll get deeper into that in a minute. But pointing down, it's just a symbol of a process, which is the descent of spirit into matter. And of course, you know, a lot of Gnostics and other traditions would say, yeah, that was evil. The demiurgos is kind of like the devil, and it trapped us. So an inverted pentagram sucks. To me, it's just like, this is what happened, and this is a symbol of it, you know? So, okay, so now the serpent story. Now that we've sorted out some of the wheat from the chaff, and we'll get into some more crazy Bible misinterpretations in a bit. By the way, hit the like button, share, subscribe subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notifications if you haven't already. If you guys have any questions, you know, feel free, but use all your well-learned polites, or I'll lay your soul to waste. Right? So, the serpent, right? So Adam and Eve are sitting around the garden, and let's call him Jehovah, for just because it's one of our options, comes along and he says, do not mix the Syrian rue with acacia and make an ayahuasca-like beverage that will later be consumed by Plato and these people in the Eleusinian mysteries, and is the reason why the acacia branch is sacred to the Freemasons. Right? or something to that effect. I mean, the first time I read the story, I think, well, after I was aware of psychedelics, I thought, come on, this is some kind of psychoactive plant that opens your eyes, right? So Jehovah says, do not eat of that plant, because verily thou shalt die. And so the serpent comes along, and remember, all over the planet, the serpent is sacred. It's a symbol of knowledge. It's generally revered, like in every other context. And I think that may well have been an intentional demonization of another holy symbol. And so the serpent comes along, and he says, you should eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because verily thou shalt not die. Thou shalt know as Elohim knows. And it sounds to me like the serpent was saying, you will know things that interdimensional beings or aliens or whatever Elohim actually was, if this is actually something that happened, right? You're going to know the things that it knows. And so I thought, okay, who do you trust here? The guy that's threatening you with death if you don't remain in ignorance, or the serpent who encourages you to expand your consciousness and to empower yourself with knowledge? And what happens? They eat of the plant, and just like the serpent said, they know, and they didn't die. So who lied? Jehovah lied. Elohim lied, not the serpent. And so whether that's true or not, this is what some of the early sects of Gnosticism believed. And they were burned at the stake for it. I mean, obviously, they were accused of being a Satanist, because even though there is nothing in the book of Genesis in the original Hebrew that equates Lucifer with the snake or the devil, by the way, there nowhere in the Bible does it say Lucifer is also Satan. The Lucifer is mentioned twice in the Bible. The first time in Ezekiel, it says, how hast thou fallen from heaven, bright and shining morning star, which is one of the epithets for Lucifer. And then in the book of Revelation, Jesus says, I am the bright and shining morning star. Excuse me? And we'll get into that. You guys, that's a doozy, man. If you guys have never, I've looked online too, and man, it seems like people don't notice this stuff. But wait until you hear all the evidence that the story that the Bible actually tells is that Jesus was actually a false prophet who had come to deceive and drag people to hell. It's very plainly explained in several places. There are warnings. There's gematria that only an initiate would be able to interpret. But we'll get to that. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Can you take us back to how religion was formed? What would you say is the earliest religion? Well, remember when I said that Albert Pike said that man had truth and that he found error. He also, one of the most brilliant things that he ever wrote was that the true scripture is writ large upon the land. And what he meant by that is that there are signs, symbols, hints, clues, the writings on the wall, the rest is up to you, right? That the universe communicates with us, and that it does so within the strictures of natural law, right? It can't do anything impossible, but I mean, if you guys have watched my synchronicity videos, I think that's a good explanation of how this sort of thing happens. Also in my own life, it seems like clues were like planted that made no sense at the time. Like my first girlfriend named my unit Hermes. This was like a 12-year-old white trash girl that probably had no clue who Hermes was. And for her to name my wand that, and hermeticism to become so significant in my life all those years later, was really strange. And if that was the only thing that had happened along those lines, I would be able to dismiss it a lot more easily. But for example, the first time I heard the term gnosis, I was like, I'm a Gnostic. I don't know what that means, but I know that it's true. And I was probably 8 or 9 when that happened. And it's, to this day, it's one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And it really doesn't make any sense. And it turns out that I had been thinking along the lines of I guess what you could call neo-gnostics or non-Christian Gnostics almost since I came out of the womb. I've been in a state of metaphysical contemplation, and this entire doctrine of gnosis, as I understand it, was already existent within the sort of hermetic Gnostic tradition, or the secret societies. And so to answer your question more succinctly, how religion was formed, there's the stoned ape theory that contact with psilocybin mushrooms was what originally gave us the impetus not only for spiritual thought, but for language, abstract language, because prior to that psychedelic experience, we had nothing to communicate except for like, mountain lion or saber-toothed tiger right behind you, or you can eat this, don't eat that, like, that kind of stuff. So that's a possibility, but panpsychism, I believe, is what anthropologists or whoever the people are that would study that sort of thing. Panpsychism is basically the idea that everything is alive. And it's really interesting to me that, I in the last couple of years, people that study consciousness and even a lot of physicists are coming to the conclusion that consciousness is somehow the fundamental, it's what gives rise to order, right? One way that I thought about this, it just sprung into my head one day, and it turned out that I was misappropriating a term from philosophy, but I just had this thought one day driving along that consciousness is the organizing principle. And that seems to be correct. And I think what's happening, as Terence McKenna called the archaic revival, is that we are realizing that, and that it was intentionally obscured from us because the rulers, man, I mean, a pope, when asked about Christianity, said the people need the truth veiled in myth. And so when I talk about, how there are things in the Bible that are not understood by non-initiates, that's kind of what I'm referencing. And I think what they did is they took these deep, profound truths that we all resonate with because they are in every cell in the universe, according to some theories. And so people connect with the truth that's buried in all of this bullshit. I mean, you guys know all of the insanity in the Old Testament, stone a child if he's disobedient to God, and all of this craziness. So let's get through this biblical stuff so we can get into some deep metaphysics. We talked about the Tetragrammaton. Okay, so let's talk about Satan for a second, because Satan doesn't actually appear much in the Bible. And ha-Satan is the actual Hebrew pronunciation, and it means adversary or stumbling block. And so the general Christian perception of Satan is that he is in opposition to God, that he rebelled against God. And we'll see that actually does have a deep metaphysical underlying meaning. That it just blew my mind. That I can't wait to get to that part, but we need to talk about this first. So what happens in the book of Job? Do you guys know the story? It starts, Satan is walking to and fro and to and fro and to and fro upon the earth. And God comes along and he says, Satan, what are you doing? And Satan says, I'm walking to and fro and to and fro and to and fro upon the earth. And somehow they get to talking about Job. And Satan says, well, Lord, he's completely faithful and loyal. And God says, oh yeah, go kill his wife and give him boils and burn his house down and see if he still loves me then. And Satan is like, as you wish, my liege, or whatever, does exactly what he is told. So this idea that Satan is rebelling, and he goes back and he says, okay, he's still faithful. And God says, okay, well, let's make sure. Why don't you go kill his children and give him some more diseases and pour salt in his leprous wounds, or whatever he does, torture this guy. So here you have Satan doing the evil bidding of the Old Testament God exactly as he's instructed. And yet the preacher sits in the pulpit and says, this rebellious, evil Satan, totally contrary to what the book actually says. So, I'm not advocating for Satan here, because, there are other parts of the Bible where he says, he's gnashing of teeth and he's a real bad guy and all this stuff. But I thought that was really fucking crazy that, Satan actually, the only time he does anything in the Bible, he does exactly what God tells him to. And yet he's depicted as the adversary to God, this evil thing. So I also want to mention real quick in terms of the further demonization of hermeticism and the secret mystery schools and the symbols that are associated with. Actually, it started, as far as we know, with Pythagoras, and that is crazy as hell. I don't know if they actually modeled the Christian concept of the devil in part on Pythagoras, because Pythagoras actually means the old serpent, or the old dragon in Greek. And so, or the aged dragon, I guess, technically, whatever, you guys get the point, right? And he gave us the scale and that we use today in Western music. And he was into numerology and magic and all of this stuff that we associate with Lucifer. And his name actually means the old serpent, the old dragon. So that's some kind of weird coincidence. That would be an example, I think, of the true scripture being writ large upon the land. One of these clues and hints. Also, the Pythagoreans drew a pentagram above their doors in order to identify each other. They had secret handshakes, as the tradition would be carried on in the mystery schools. So that is really crazy. Oh, I should share this with you guys. This is an oral tradition that probably none of you are aware of. Some people have heard that before he fell, Lucifer was said to be the court musician, the highest of the archangels. The right-hand man of the Lord. But what often isn't told in the mythology is that he had a harp in his chest with no strings that played directly into the mind of God. And it was this depth of connection that created his vanity and made him like the first rock star. And in case you guys don't know, it is actually true that all the major rock bands were basically Luciferian, every single one of them. I mean, even the Flaming Lips, you know, it's a pretty weird thing. Oh yeah, let me actually get a guitar and show you something else about that. You'll probably recognize this. So that is Diabolus in Musica, the tritone, and it said that you would be burned at the stake in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, for playing it. Some people say it's not actually historically accurate, but it is the blue note. And I forgot to mention that this Hell-o-ween, there's a full moon and it's a blue moon. And in the occult, Lucifer's light is said to be blue. So it's weird that the devil's note became known later as the blue note. And when white people heard blues musicians playing it, because it's also you play a blues scale. It's the note that's added to the 5-note scale, the 6th note, which up an octave becomes a 13. Both numbers associated with the devil, right? And also the 6 is like the inverse of the 1, the dark reflection of God. So I don't know if maybe they based this numerology on the scale, because if not, it's mind-blowingly fucking weird, right? So when white people heard that note, they said, oh, it's the devil's music. They recognized it again, even though it had been, you know, probably a few hundred years since this reference had been well known. So what happened next? Blues became rock and roll, and then rock and roll became heavy metal. And as it got heavier, there was more and more tritones used, and it got more and more overtly satanic, which is kind of crazy. Maybe it's just a bunch of weird coincidences. Also, I wanted to mention that Hermes started to talk about the demonization of the hermetic thing, and it is connected to music. Hermes was a god of the crossroads and a god of music and magic, and he was often depicted with horns. So this legend of going down to the crossroads and meeting the devil was a demonization or a recasting of Hermes. And as far as I can tell, you know, the secret doctrine and all the powerful teachings that come from it, or, you know, they kind of fall under the heading of Hermes. And I think that was another deliberate distortion. Okay, so let's see. where are we now? Okay, so the Gnostic Metaphysics. This is where it's going to get really wild. So it's interesting to me subjectively. I had this revelation on my own. I had never read it anywhere prior to coming to this knowledge, if that's what it is, and I think it is. And it's Jewish mysticism. You'll find it. It's probably the most prevalent manifestation, I guess, of it. But you know, there are other. The blinking of the Eye of Shiva seems to maybe be um, a reference to it. And the idea that consciousness is the fabric of creation is reflected in this idea as well. And it also has something to do with the eye and the triangle. And I'll tell you guys what that actually symbolizes in just a minute. So the idea is that before creation, there was nothing. And it's not something we can really conceptualize. And this is where the paradox, because you know, so many different mystics from so many different traditions have said, the universe is a product of a replicating or reflecting a single process, the one thing doing one thing. And so once this happened with the original nothing, it was reflected in miniature in all of the but we'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the paradox is that the only way to actually have unity is to have nothing. Because if you have a thing and you have space, you have two things. So, and that the fact of that paradox was essential to the potentiality for the universe to divide like a cell. I mean, you guys can see this one thing doing one thing only. I just saw an article about how a comet hits the Earth, and that's where life came from, they're saying now. Just like sperm hitting an egg. And, you know, I mean, the cell dividing is the exact same thing as this metaphysical concept of nothing losing its unity. And what is said to have happened is that light, remember that Lucifer is Latin for light bearer. So this thing that was not God, because it was something, right? Because God is nothing. That's another thing Albert Pike says in Morals and Dogma. The Phoenicians thought me light, but I am nothing. Nothing in all caps, you know. And so it is this paradoxical nothing that sustains everything. I mean, people say that all the time, but we're going to get deep into what that actually means right now. And so it realized I am, which is one of the Hebrew names of God, Eheye. And that's, you know, a human approximation, but basically it became conscious, aware that there was something there. And the introduction of this awareness, this consciousness, this knowledge and relation created division, because now there was nothing but also consciousness. And so it split. And I've heard two people this week talk about the thing that separated them as a singularity, which I think is a slight misappropriation of a term, but you could think of it like the nothingness became like a veil that divided the two polarities of God, which you could think of as the masculine and feminine, darkness and light, mystery and knowledge, the point and the circle whose circumference is everywhere and center is nowhere. And so this process continued, and it divided. The little balls of consciousness divided into two. That's where I was mentioning the twin flame thing, and then those divided into three, and then five. And what I was referencing earlier about this ayahuasca vision is that I actually asked Pachamama, because I hadn't really worked through it all yet. I was like, what is up with this Lucifer thing? Like, I haven't really decoded it all. I feel like there's really something there, and that it's not evil at all. And she said that is absolutely correct. You could think of it like this emanation from a single point, like the zodiac, the sun in the zodiac, or Christ and the 12 disciples. And the where you're at on the dial when you're emanated determines your archetype of consciousness. And so she said Lucifer is really that illuminating aspect of consciousness that seeks to bring divine knowledge to man. Like Prometheus is another name for the same idea. And so that was that. But so this is what the fable in the book of Genesis, I think, is actually referencing, that when they ate of the tree of knowledge, it was knowledge that caused the descent into matter. It was awareness, it was consciousness that catalyzed the process that ultimately would lead to the descent of spirit into matter, the crystallization of this thought of deity into the universe. The laws of nature are like, you could think of it as like the mind of God, and matter is like the body. And light bearer can be taken a number of ways, actually, because let me ride this thought out and I'll answer that. Sylvanus. If you're new to the stream too, please, I just want to ask again, hit the like button, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. We are trying to go and meet with the Shuar in Puyo, and I'm actually trying to get a center developed up there. I really want to move to the jungle, into the jungle, and work with this tribe that I've studied since I was a child. They've been very, very welcoming. The opportunity is incredible and massive, and it's going to require some funding. And first, we're going to try to make a documentary, and we're just really trying to get that done. So, no, don't feel like you're distracting me. If you want to support that and the rest of our endeavors, if you click on our Patreon link, you can get Skype. If you want to talk to me, do guitar lessons, and there's premium content that is not available on the regular channel, and I do try to keep it sort of oriented towards the things I wouldn't really necessarily say to the outer circle. Okay, so actually, where the hell was I, man? I think that might have. So we were talking about the, okay. So now let's talk about where the concept of Lucifer rebelling against God as the light bearer in relation to this metaphysical process that I've been describing. Anything that is nothing is not God, according to this metaphysics, I guess. Because in God, it is eternal perfection, nothing. Bob Dylan said about this in the museums, infinity goes up on trial, voices echo, this must be what salvation is like after a while. And I think that's kind of what he was referencing, that in this nothingness, there's just nothing. And so when this spark, this light, this consciousness that we have come to, some of us, to refer to as Lucifer, it had a desire, it had will, it had, it wanted, it was not satisfied with the eternal perfection that is this holy nothingness. And so the underlying reality of this concept of the devil rebelling against God is actually a reference to what is really just an energetic process, and it is a myth or metaphor that is like the fairy tale child's version of the actual process. So if I was going to recommend a book to someone that's new to the occult, I would say Magic in Theory and Practice by Aleister Crowley, even if you only read the beginning, where he talks about the rules of magic, and he says that magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. And if you follow, there's nothing evil in it either. I mean, a lot of that is just, he did it on purpose. He put the horns on it to scare away the unworthy and the insincere and morons. I really don't believe that Aleister Crowley was evil. And in fact, I think he was the greatest mystic that I've ever encountered. But at any rate, and also the Book of Lies, so falsely called, is extraordinary. It is absolutely amazing, but you have to look up terms like Keter, and you have to know what the Ruach and the different levels of the soul are in Jewish mysticism. And if you come across terms, basically, long story short, that you don't know, it's worth it to find out what they mean, because otherwise the book is almost just a bunch of gibberish. There are incredible lines in it. When nothing became conscious, it made a bad bargain, right? And that went earlier when I was saying that this whole idea of nothingness becoming consciousness and that causing the division and all that, I did not read that anywhere. It just popped in my head. So when I got the Book of Lies and I see this line, when nothing became conscious, I was like, what? And further research revealed to me this wasn't really my idea, you know. And I don't know, I've had a number of those kind of experiences, and it all relates to this specific tradition. So I don't know if that's an indication of reincarnation, or you know, geneticists have proven that we can access ancestral memory. So Sir Isaac Newton is actually a very, very direct descendant of mine. My mother's maiden name was still Newton when she married my brother's father. So he was very much into this stuff. Point being, I could just had an ancestor that studied all of this, and I was just remembering an ancestral thing. I have no idea, but it was really incredible for me, you know, to have. It's weirder than that. Maybe, you know, that could explain the Gnostic thing, the way I reacted to that at like 8 years old, like I knew, you know. And so when I got older and actually started researching this stuff, I realized, like, holy shit, this is what I've been thinking since I was a child. It was just it really mind blowing. And again, I'm not trying to say that that proves that it's all true or anything, because there are multiple explanations for any metaphysical phenomenon. That's one of the things about the serpent, right? In my experience, when you come to when you follow a metaphysical concept to its conclusion, you don't get one thing. It wise, like the tongue of a serpent, right? It just splits. For example, I have remembered all sorts of stuff from a specific person's life. I'm going to make a video about it. I don't want to reveal it now, but with absolute certainty. I knew a lot of the information in his books word for word before I ever read them. I demonstrated that for people, not intentionally even. Again, that's all going to be in this other video. But the reality of it is, it does not prove reincarnation. It proves that either reincarnation or ancestral memory. You know, there's a kid in Europe right now that's being touted as proof of reincarnation because he can remember 1111, make a wish. He can remember his grandfather's memories, and that's a relative. So, is Biden evil? He's caught in the devil's bargain. Yeah, I mean, I think that Donald Trump is evil. I think that Biden, I think that Harris is one of the scariest people I've ever, I mean, no one could in good conscience really, if you're a good person, if you look at the history of her keeping people in prison that she knew were innocent to save face, even though some of them were on death row, and this isn't something she did once, she did it routinely. She kept people in prison beyond their release date, which is awful because they were working for the state and providing cheap labor. Joe Biden, you know, everyone says Trump is racist, and then Biden compares little black children to cockroaches, and he drafted the 1994 crime bill. And so I think on both sides of the aisle, I don't want to get too deeply into this because I'm actually going to talk about it again on Tuesday, but we have a lot of selective perception. We have what I call collective pathological denial, because I think things have gotten so bad that people literally can't handle the truth. You know, it's just too much. It's too threatening. It's too overwhelming. And it also means that they have to give up their comforts and actually do something. And I think it's just too much for people. It's too much to really objectively analyze what it is that we have come to. Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard calling out Harris. You got to watch that. Also, when Harris called Biden out for being a segregationist, a racist, and a rapist. And now she's like, I love him. He should be president. It's like, no, you guys are just as scary as the other side. But I don't, this is supposed to be Hell-o-ween. We're not supposed to talk about stuff that's that scary. This is supposed to be, you know, illusions of scary shit, right? Okay, so we are stardust, we are golden, we are caught in the devil's bargain. So the big question, I guess, is assuming that this is all true, this metaphysical model, and I'm pretty convinced of it, man, because I've seen it bubble up in so many places and so many people for the totally different paths. Oh man, sorry, I forgot to finish explaining the model, which was that, remember we were talking about how it divided. And so what made them opposite sort of is the singularity in the middle is what people refer to as the veil, and it reverses everything. So I was talking to my friend who is a PhD psychologist, and he's a physicist that studied at Stanford. So really highly intelligent guy, and we drank some ayahuasca and had some ketamine, and we were in a very, 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 very altered state. And he started explaining how the Dirac, the French mathematician, that his equation was, it was like there's all these other equations that kind of like spawn out of the central thing, and he was explaining how they are inverse, like mirroring each other around the singularity. And that is like a mathematical model, a theoretical mathematical model of the same idea that I have come to through my own machinations or musings or whatever you should call them. That this veil reverses everything. And so this nothingness that is in the center is sort of the it's what causes that reversal, I guess. And it was just crazy to listen to this guy because I hadn't told him my metaphysics or anything. And then he starts explaining this mathematical representation of, oh, and also something I really love that he said is that he said, well, in truth, the mathematics are in illusory drapery, but over the real phenomenological reality or whatever. So what do we have left here? I'm trying to think if there's anything in the description that I haven't covered. Oh, the devil's bargain. Sorry, I got off. I did not sleep at all. I went to bed at 7 in the morning last night and got a couple hours of sleep. And I can't believe I've been this coherent, honestly. Hopefully things won't get too rough after the election. I'm sorry to tell you this, but that is almost impossible. Either Trump is going to be reelected. His wife has been wearing a brown coat, making obvious references to the Nazis, right? This is not like conspiracy paranoia. He has made references to becoming a dictator, right? Dictator, I mean. If Biden wins, the Proud Boys, who say out of patriotism, to protect democracy from fascism, they're going to try to undermine democracy and use violence to reinstate their fascist dictator. So no matter who wins, the shitstorm in the United States has only just begun. I'm sorry. But this is a good thing because it is going to expose these people in their totality. It's going to force people to realize that we actually have to do something for real instead of just, look, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red. They do it on purpose. What happens is they go this way a little bit and then they go red, and then it's like a wrecking ball that undoes everything the blue guys did. And then the red guys do a bunch of stuff and then they turn blue and the wrecking ball swings the other way, the pendulum. I mean, this is hermetic magic, you guys. The Masons really are powerful, and they are magicians for sure. It's a crazy thing to think about. There are Masons throughout our society. They're teachers, they're cops, they're business owners, and they put on robes and they practice magic. And no, it's not all evil. It definitely isn't. A lot of them are very good right-hand path, working for the collective, totally sincere. But there's also the left-hand path and the Black Brothers. There, I think people call them, conspiracy theorists call them the Black Hats. There's two sides to every coin. But the point is that they actually do use an understanding of energy systems and sacred geometry in order to manipulate populations and psychology. And if you want to see it for yourself, all you have to do is read the first few pages of Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. And he is very incredibly eloquently describing how they perceive societies as energy systems and how they think in terms of geometries and use all of that to sort of control things in very much the way of a magician. Magicians are not what people think. It's not that type of magic. They're not doing the impossible with spells and stuff. That's got nothing to do with it. It has to do with having an understanding of natural law that's very similar to Taoism, but it's the Taoist uses it to understand. The Freemason uses it to build pyramids and create empires, whatever, So sorry, Sylvanus, it is definitely, without question, we're going to have more issues. Okay, so, I forgot to mention the weird correlation with Legba and the Orishas in Africa is also like a horned god that you meet at the crossroads that deals in magic and music. So I missed that. What about the number 13? Well, remember what I said about how there's the central sun, just like in our solar system, because everything is a reflection of the one thing doing one thing. And number 13 is the number of initiation, which is actually 4, but if you add 1 and 3, it becomes 4. It's associated with the devil. It became unlucky because King Henry, I think, issued an edict for the heads of the Templars on Friday the 13th, and that's how it became unlucky. But most importantly and fundamentally, if you think about the zodiac, the 12 signs around the sun, the 12 disciples of Christ, with Christ as the sun. Oh man, I wish I had that plant here. There's this tree that I found the other day that has these massive thorns. I've always called it the Jesus tree, because if you put it around your head, it looks like the. And I'd never seen it in flower. And man, where is it? It's unbelievable, this coincidence. Oh, there it is. Maybe you guys can actually see this. Let's see. Those little yellow, they're just like suns. Look, they're little suns on the Jesus tree. I couldn't believe it, man. I was like, you got to be kidding me, and that's not actually what it's called. It's actually turned out to be an acacia. It contains 5-MeO-DMT and phenethylamines. So that was crazy. But yeah, so the number 13, the real significance of it, and the reason it's the number of initiation in part, is because it means that you understand that it's not 10, it's not 12, it's 13 that is this number of initiation, because it means that you have this knowledge. Which is that the 12 archetypes of consciousness that are reflected in the zodiac, with the central consciousness that is animating them, or So yeah, that's that. What else do we got here? Okay, so also I think it's important to consider how if you look at like Luciferians that are not evil, they're just all about independence. And like Aleister Crowley said, what we really have to do is discover our true will and constrain every breath, every deed to this higher purpose. And something I noticed a couple of weeks ago, that Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro and Joe Rogan, they're very different people, but they all mentioned this in the same week, which was that we have a crisis of purpose that is the fundamental cause of the degradation of our society. People, it's like an existential crisis, I guess. And people don't know why they're here or what they're doing. Materialism has, just created this like shallow, pathetic, and it's been done intentionally for sure, because if people have the gnosis, one of the things that you learn is that we are one consciousness divided for the sake of union, right? The universe just needed something to do, because nothingness is just eternal nothingness, right? And this goes back to the devil's bargain thing that I didn't finish that thought earlier. I apologize. My lack of sleep is making me a little bit skittery. But the big question is, if this is true, that our choices were either to follow basically the Lucifer, the light, down into the material realm, and one of the laws that are necessary for this type of creation, again, Albert Pike said they are not just because they are his laws. They are his laws because they are just. Just not meaning fair in this case, meaning these are God's laws or natural law, because this is the laws that the universe, that creation had to be predicated upon in order for it to exist. And unfortunately, sort of one of those laws is the equal and opposite reaction, that everything is perfectly balanced by its opposite, that everything contains its contradiction, right? This is one of the overlooked aspects of the yin yang symbol. There's the black and the white, but there's also a little bit of black in the white and a little bit of white in the black, right? And so duality and suffering and pain, I mean, was it worth the orgasms and the experience of going to a concert that's amazing, and the art and the animals and all of these amazing things, that we have to balance that by like infants getting raped and murdered and all of the most horrible stuff that you can possibly think of, because these things literally create each other. So would it have been better to just stay in nothingness, where there's just nothing, not even a line, not a fracture, not a thought, or to actually do something? But then we have to, and this is why when they say that the devil is the source of all evil, in this metaphysical model, there's actually some truth to that, because if it wasn't for this light that caused the descent, the immaterial spark, it's been called, I think, there would be no evil. So let's see. What I know there's something we haven't. Oh, and we talked a little bit about the demonization of individuality in this context, because it's saying that the ego also is another manifestation sort of the devil. And in my opinion, it's not that the ego in and of itself is evil. This is a misconception. The problem is that we live in a culture where we're not taught how to constrain the demon of ego, to relate to it intelligently and constructively to the degree that we should. We have a fear-based, selfish, self-centered system that it's not the thing. It's the misapplication and misunderstanding of the thing. Without the ego, we would not have identity and individuality. That's one aspect. That's one facet of it. And so, but that's also why you see in Christianity this homogenization of people, the sheeple in the steeple kind of thing that happens there. Okay, so let's talk about Jesus for a second. This is going to blow your minds, you guys, if you don't know this stuff already, and few people do, which is really, really mind blowing to me. But so you guys remember John? He was Jesus's teacher when he was alive. So and this is not just about the myths, you guys. Pay attention to how obvious this stuff is, and then think about how few people notice it. I mean, it's frightening, and it teaches you a tremendously profound lesson about perception and critical thinking, and it's just amazing to me. But John says, "Beware, Satan may come as an angel of light." Literally, like 20 pages later, Jesus comes and he says, "God has sent me, my Father has sent me, and I am the light." Hold on a second. Weren't we just warned 20 pages ago that Satan would come as an angel of light, which is literally what just happened? It's like, do you guys not remember 20 pages back? What the hell are you? And then beware a wolf in sheep's clothing. Well, isn't a lamb a baby sheep? Yeah. And then there's the first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods. Doesn't say until my son comes. So you have to blaspheme in order to be a Christian. That's like the first prerequisite of following Jesus, is that you have to break the first commandment if you're going to believe that he's God. Because it doesn't say, and this is God, he's all-knowing, right? Omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. He would have known, have no other gods until my son comes, and that's cool. And then you shall have no graven images, no likenesses. All those pictures of Jesus, all the crosses, all of that stuff is all blasphemy. Okay? So it gets worse, though. Lucifer and Jesus both have the appellate morning star. Only time that this term comes up in the Bible. It applies to one of them. Okay, so that's weird. I'm missing one. Oh, this is great. You guys are going to love this. So gematria, which I alluded to earlier, is this mystical practice. There are different variations of it. I've experienced some incredibly weird stuff with it. It does seem like something you could dismiss as total lunacy, because there are so many possible numerical combinations and sums, and of course there's going to be connections somewhere. I mean, it's like apophenia is attributing significance to coincidence, and it's supposed to be, an indication of schizophrenia. So you do have to be very careful with this kind of stuff, and this is actually one of the ways I think that mysticism drives people mad. So one of the practices in gematria, which is where you take, there's a numerical value for every letter in Hebrew. And this has been worked out with English and Latin and other languages now, but it originally derives from Hebrew. And some of the letters have different values depending on where they are. If they're at the end of a word, you know, then the value changes. And so when I first smoked DMT, I had suffered from chronic fatigue syndrome for years, and I had gotten no relief. And I took a massive hit of DMT, and the symptoms were gone. And I was like, what the hell? So my friend had just told me about gematria, and there's an online calculator where you can just punch in phrases, and it will give you other phrases that are in the database. It's kind of been ruined because so many idiots have just put all this random crazy shit in there that there's just gobbledygook. But back then, there wasn't much in it. So it was much easier to see any potential, you know, meaningful expressions in this stuff. So I punched N-dimethyltryptamine into the gematria calculator. It was the first time I ever used it. The only phrase in the database that had the same numerical value as N-dimethyltryptamine was cure for chronic fatigue syndrome, right? So I was like, holy fucking shit, maybe this is real. And that's not the only thing. I mean, there's some pretty weird stuff, but that random and insane, I mean, it was like, man, and it kind of makes sense, you know, that number is the underlying reality. And so even if we didn't do it consciously, the idea that there are mathematical relationships that maybe have an underlying that comes from consciousness, from subconsciousness. I can see why it would make sense. But here's the thing. One of the practices in gematria is to multiply by 9, because 9 is a number of truth. It's always 9, right? Like 9 times 9 is 81, 8 plus 1 is 9. It doesn't matter what multiple of 9, they always, no matter how long the numbers get, they always add up to 9, right? So one of the practices is to add up, say, a name, multiply it by 9. 9 is the number of the moon, so I don't know if you knew that, and that's why you... then everything about the moon, by the way, 9 has been attributed to the moon in the Kabbalah for centuries at least, and everything about the moon is 9. It's like 81, 81st, whatever, the 81st, the 181st, the size of the Earth, and all this stuff actually, like everything about it, all of its dimensions and stuff, and the miles from the Earth, all 9. But yeah, I'll talk about Moonchild for a second in a minute. That was Crowley's only good nonfiction, man. Some of his writing was incredible. A lot of the mystical stuff, but man, Diary of a Dope Fiend was one of the worst written books. I could not even read it, man. I was like, God, how could it be this bad? But Moonchild was actually okay. It's the only readable nonfiction. But we were going somewhere good with this. Okay, so 9 is the number that you multiply, say, Jesus Christ, right? So in the book of Revelation, it says, let him who hath understanding count the number of a man. And 666 is the number that will reveal who the Antichrist is. In Hebrew gematria, if you add up Jesus Christ and multiply by 9, it's 666. So is Messiah, and so is serpent. So that's another one. This indication that in reality, what the Bible is actually telling you very clearly is that Jesus was literally the devil come to deceive people. And if you use Jesus's own metric, use his own words, judge a man not by his intentions, but by the fruits of his labors. If you use that on Christianity, more people have been killed, tortured, cultures destroyed, genocides, oppression of evolution, the perpetuation of ignorance, limitation of growth in so many ways, freedom, so many beautiful and wonderful things have been destroyed and suppressed and oppressed that by the numbers, more people have suffered because of the advent of Christianity than all of the other dictators and evil people in the history of the world combined. True fact. So if you use Jesus' own metric against him, he is the evilest influence in the history of the world. And I mean, that's not okay with me, you know. And by the way, I have nothing against the teachings of Christ himself. Uh, Everything that he said is fine. So it's not really exactly that it's anything innate in the teachings of Jesus that make it so bad. It's really the distortion of the government and the way that it's taught from the pulpit. And but you guys, I mean, the other day a friend of mine posted, you know, some of the torture devices that were used on the Gnostics because of the heresy, the Gnostic heresy, which was, I never got into this. Not only that the serpent was telling the truth, but also that you didn't need the church, that you didn't need a preacher, that you didn't need an intermediary, that divine knowledge, divine revelation was available to the individual through contemplation, through meditation, and probably through the use of entheogenic plants. If you look at the Hammadi, the Nag Hammadi text, and listen to this shit, you guys. Think about this for a second. The probability that this would happen is just so low. I mean, it's such a fucking crazy thing. Uh, these Muslims were digging at the base of a cliff, trying to get bird shit for fertilizer, and they dug up these clay pots, and in them were all these scrolls. And it is one of the great tragedies that they were like, "Oh, this is Coptic writing, so it's Christian." And they were Muslims. They just started burning it. And then another coincidence, like what this story doesn't even make any sense. You know what I mean? Like obviously there's some kind of intelligence that is involved in our existence, right? Like when I say I'm not Christian, I'm not really saying I'm an atheist either. It's you know something in between this belief in this like you know Bronze Age kind of like idiot version of God, you know, this child's fable version, and atheism. There's a middle ground, and that's always where you find the truth, you know, between two extremes. Um, so they dig up these pots, they start burning them, and an antiques guy comes along and he's like, "What are you doing?" And they show him the scrolls, and he buys them. Like, why would that guy happen to walk upon these guys that are in the middle of the desert and happen to dig right in? And it's not like they're digging huge holes; they're just getting some bird shit for fertilizer. I mean, a couple of wheelbarrows full or something. They dig up these clay pots, and if you read them, which is difficult because a lot of it was indecipherable, there's a lot of missing stuff. Uh, it is way, way, way more like what you would think a legitimate spiritual vision, or you know, it's like psychedelic and profound and strange and uh, just incredible. So yeah, the Nag Hammadi texts also, they tell a very different story as well. There is the Gospel of Magdalena, the Gospel of Q, the Gospel of Thomas. Um, Man, my son is really crying out there. I'm sure he's okay. Okay, so say something about Moonchild. Well, all of the people in the book are based on real people. The enemy, of course, is McGregor Mathers, who was the founder of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, that Crowley got eventually kind of turned on and left the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And the idea, speaking of Jesus, was to create a homunculus, which has a couple of different definitions. In this context, it's a virgin birth. And so he was, and this was something he actually did and failed, but they were trying to impregnate this woman magically and create a virgin birth in the same way that Jesus did. But something maybe more interesting and more along the lines of the topic that we're actually discussing here is something that he says in Magic and Theory and Practice, which is one of the main reasons that people have considered Aleister Crowley an evil Satanist. It's a joke, and it's really, really obvious what he was doing, but people just take it at face value. There is a little caveat from Sora Vikaram at the bottom of the page that says, this is a joke. But Crowley says the most perfect sacrifice, or the best sacrifice, is a male child of perfect innocence. And of course, people are like, "Oh, you evil bastard." Well, he was setting them up so he could just say, "Really?" and hand them a copy of the New Testament. Awesome. Like, the thing that sucks about it is that there are a lot of idiots out there in their pursuit of power and wealth and riches that might actually take him literally and do this. And I'm sure it's happened, and that sucks. I mean, that's terrible. But what he was actually, he was throwing the New Testament God under the bus and saying, really, I am evil and awful, and you worship a God that did this? Could you get any stupider? You know? Oh, man. The Kabbalion, by the way, I just wanted to relate this one story. I think we're probably going to wrap it up because I got to go to a party. And I'm just so tired. It's really hard to maintain. Oh, you guys, did I tell you about the Pope that called Christianity a myth? That was mind blowing. The people need the, oh yeah, I did tell you that. People need the truth cloaked in myth. But there's also something I would recommend. There is a documentary called Religiosity with not Bill Barr. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Religiosity. And there's a scene where it's Meyer, whatever that guy's name is. He goes and he talks to a priest at the Vatican. And this priest is like the evilest, like he's like, like he looks evil. His voice sounds like Gollum or something. It's like, how is this guy real? And how would anyone not like run in terror when he approached him? Like but he starts asking him, like, isn't this really polytheism? And isn't that blasphemy in reference to Catholicism? And the guy's like, we polled Catholics and Jesus was number 8 on the list of people that they prayed to. And all of this other stuff basically demonstrating they are so confident that their followers are completely brain dead, brainwashed. They're not even going to hear a Vatican priest calling it a myth, calling it polytheism, laughing about the stupidity of the followers. This is a Vatican priest at the Vatican. They don't even care. A little while back, too, this current Pope, he was giving a speech to like 80,000 Catholics, and he said, Lucifer, who is the father of Christ, no one noticed. True story. I might not have gotten the quote exactly right. It was either, Jesus, whose father is Lucifer, something along those lines, and no one noticed. It was all over the internet for like 10 seconds, but it's like when things are just too much for people and they threaten their worldview, they'll just literally just choose not to see it. And I really wonder sometimes, like, what is the real extent of that? Like, how, we only see 1% of the full spectrum of light. We're not perceiving much, really. And then if you add to that how much we seem to be capable of actually tuning out, pretty amazing. Flammus Deus? I'm not familiar with that term. What is Flammus Deus? 2 flames? I don't know the reference. So I think we've pretty much. Oh, okay. I mean, we've pretty much covered it all. I mean, that's the metaphysical origins of Lucifer and the idea that knowledge causes the fall, and that's really, to me, the fundamental thing. And really, one of the main intentions I had for this live stream is mostly just to demonstrate the people's faulty perception and how insane it is. The extent of it is just, it's unbelievable, incredible. So happy Hell-o-ween, you guys. I hope you've enjoyed this live stream. Hail me, I guess. Hail Satan. Yeah. Oh, and what about the scapegoat thing, right? I missed that. I don't think that has its origins in Christianity or the Bible, but it's just another one of those incredible things that Christians actually run around like. I have literally had Christians that I knew like killed people and beat people to death with tire irons and stuff tell me that they were able to do that stuff because they're Christian and they know they've been forgiven, no matter what they do. So there are psychopaths out there, and there are way more of them than you guys probably think, unless you live in the South and you know them. But also, if you're a non-believer, then if they torture and kill you, and people think that they just used to think like this, it's not true. They still do. They will. They will. And I think that if Trump loses, there's probably going to be a lot of this kind of, because they literally believe that the Democrats are avatars of the devil, and especially the far left. These people are Satan or Satan's spawn, and so if they burn you alive or torture you and kill you, you're going to burn in hell for all of eternity anyway. So it might as well start now. Like, do not expect mercy from modern Christians if the shit hits the fan. Sorry, I'm not trying to scare you, but it's true. So what I'm saying is that I have never met a Satanist that, they feel like some of them do evil, a lot of them don't. It's just about independence and freedom and rebellion to a lot of them. We're genuinely not evil. Some of them are, but the ones that are evil that I've read their writings or met and talked to, they expect to suffer for it. At least a lot of Christians actually believe that the fact that Christ will forgive them gives them license to do absolute evil. And that is really something to think about. People think that, people get offended because, that we are all conditioned to think, oh, well, Jesus had such a nice message. And look, preaching basic morality, like don't throw rocks at hookers, does not make you the son of God. I mean, I don't know of any other prophets that I am less impressed by. I mean, there's like literally nothing in the teachings of Jesus beyond basic morality. Terence McKenna and Timothy Leary and Ram Dass and the Buddha and everyone else anywhere were way more impressive. And this religion gives people license to do horrendously evil things, believing that they will be forgiven. I honestly think that the United States would be the most amazing place ever if it wasn't for the influence of Christianity. The conservatives and the way that they're stagnating the culture and oppressing individual freedoms. Now the Proud Boys threatening civil war. If democracy is upheld out of patriotism, this kind of mentality is created by Christianity, because if you set a precedent, especially at a very young age, basic psychology, this is why they don't teach neurophysiology and neurobiology and basic psychology really in public schools in the United States. Because if people understood this stuff, it would make it a lot harder to make these kind of like lunatic morons out of them. But when you set a precedent that you can just believe whatever you want just because you think it makes sense, even though you know that Muslims also believe their beliefs, absolutely. That was one of the things that occurred to me when I was a very small child, when the girl was telling me, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're automatically a Satanist. I was like, how can you not understand that you only believe in Jesus because your family does, and you're an American, and, in Central and South America, they're all Catholic, and if you're in, Asia, you're going to be, Buddhist or Muslim or something. Like, how can you not understand this is what Terence McKenna called provisional programming? Right? It's just so dumb, and this is important, I think, for all of us to analyze, to think about our political inclinations, our religious disposition, or whatever it is, and try to make sure that this is actually something that has come about through our own organic processes, and that it's not just a matter of what we've been exposed to. Believing something does not make it true. Right? I mean, so what I was getting at is that, believing a Bronze Age myth, faith is our ability to believe that which we know to be untrue. I don't support, I'm all about being open-minded. I do have some spiritual dimension in my life. I think it can all be kind of just reduced to energy and consciousness and geometry. But I don't think that really negates spirit exactly. But I don't believe anything. Only the madman is absolutely sure. And when you set a precedent in your mind that it's okay to believe things that are obviously untrue, just because your heart is telling you that it makes sense, it sets a precedent in your being to believe all kinds of delusional insanity just because you want to. You don't need proof. You don't need evidence even. You don't need anything but just to decide that it's true and believe it with your whole being, to the point that you would kill a heretic because you believe Jesus is going to forgive you. I guarantee you with all my heart that Jesus is no one's savior. It's not real. It's just not real. And the one last thing I should mention the demonization of the mystery school. Aleister Crowley did not help. I understand. Look, I was persecuted, beat up, told that I was evil. Like even recently, my life has been threatened because I told a guy in town to use the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram because he said that he was feeling like parasitic negative entities were trying to attach themselves to him. So I gave him a superstitious way of dealing with his superstitious problem. Not that I entirely believe that it's superstitious, but I told him how to do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which is how magicians protect their circle, their universe, their microcosm from influences that they don't want. There was a flat earth debate. I didn't know it was a religious thing. I thought they were just idiots. And so I did a bunch of research and went to go debate this guy. And it turned out that it was actually a setup because this guy had told him that I was Luciferian and they wanted to associate science with Satanism. And in case you're just dialing in, it's not even true that I'm Luciferian. It's the non-evil Luciferian doctrine is the closest I've ever seen to something I could accept as like a good, solid doctrine. I'll admit that, but I'm definitely not evil. I believe that putting the collective interest above the individual is ultimately going to be in the best interest of the individual. So that's literally right-hand path, right? I'm definitely not like I wouldn't sacrifice anything. I love animals, But anyways, this guy told him that, and I realized maybe a half hour in that these people were all born again Christians. They were hollering like Lucifer, idiot, and Satanist, and all this evil person, and all this crap. While I'm like trying to explain to them that the earth is round and that you can actually just like go out in the backyard and use your eyes, like. So they threatened my life. They threatened an 80-year-old woman that had, just because she was there to support me. This guy was an ex-Navy SEAL, and he went up to her just because she was there supporting me and said, "Don't you have cancer? Maybe I should just kill you now and get it over with." He threatened to kill me. A couple weeks ago, I was walking down the street, and someone yelled, "You and your whole family are fucking evil." Because I told a guy how to use the pentagram, which has always been a symbol of protection, So what I'm getting at here is that I've dealt with this oppression and suppression and even threats, physical violence from Christians my entire life, and it still happens to this day. Just because I am trying to show people that I think that these things that have been demonized actually are good and powerful and empowering and have a lot to teach us, and people want to kill me over it. It's true. They've actually threatened my life. I mean, I was terrified for weeks because people contacted me after this debate and they said these people actually are dangerous. They're all Christians. So who's evil here? Like, I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just trying to tell them the earth is round. It was seriously like the Dark Ages or something, like burn the witch, like for real. So I understand why Crowley had this, because he was raised by the Plymouth Brethren. He was only allowed to read the Bible until he was like 14 or something. So I get it, but I kind of wish he hadn't use those aesthetics and said some of the regrettable things, because I think it has dissuaded people from investigating the mysteries and acquiring this knowledge. I think that Freemasonry mostly, and the mystery schools and the Luciferian Gnostics, it's some of the most empowering and it's the most concise and well articulated and efficacious. I've studied everything, and I've never seen anything like the mystery school doctrines, the secret doctrine, Blavatsky, Crowley, Alice Bailey. They have no equals in all of the mystical traditions. I really don't think they do. And I'm not alone in that opinion. So thank you guys so much. If you haven't, please hit the like button. Share this video with anybody that you think it could save from religion. No, Christians are not one group, but the Christians in the United States, the mainstream Christians in most of Europe, I mean, overwhelmingly, they are the people that I'm talking about. It's not that, like I said earlier, I don't know if you just dialed in, but I'm not saying that the teachings of Jesus in and of himself, that there's anything wrong with them. They're not. They're fuzzy and cuddly and family friendly, and it's all stuff that I totally support. But the way that it has been taught in the Bible Belt, the reason that the United States is about to go to civil war more than anything else, the reason that homosexuals get beaten to death. All of this stuff, the suppression of the evolution of science, it's not, I'm not saying that Christians in their entirety are evil, but I am trying to challenge the narrative that, for example, there's this conspiracy theory that Satanists are all kidnapping and raping your children. Statistically, child predators are 85% of them identify as Christian. You are in way more danger from Jesus than you are from the devil. It's just a matter of fact. And I believe that abolishing all religion is the thing to do. In fact, you guys, the demonization of Freemasonry and Hermeticism and the secret doctrine, these teachings that I believe are just the most powerful, because they're really a mixture of all, it's a compendium of all of the best stuff from thousands of years of magical traditions from all over the world and philosophy, all just, piled up into one thing and condensed, and the wheat separated from the chaff. And the reason that this stuff was demonized in the United States is because of one book written in the 1930s. And it was a Christian, a far-right Christian. And Adam Weishaupt, the guy that founded the Illuminati in Bavaria in 1776, I think he was arrested. They seized his papers, his private papers. So it's not like this is propaganda. This is the stuff that was in his sock drawer. And you guys, you can't write this stuff. It's incredible what happened. There was a messenger that was carrying a letter that described the plan. He was struck by lightning. And so they found him and they found the letter. And so they went to his house and arrested him. And the plan really was that he wanted to teach illumination to the whole planet. Get rid of borders, because without borders and nationalism, who are you going to go to war with? He wanted to teach people that gnosis, direct divine revelation, is real, that you can actually access the truth by way of process without dogma, without any bullshit. And when you do that, when you have exposure to the higher mind, you tend to become gentle, because you know that we are one universal consciousness and that we will eventually experience all of it from every possible perspective, which means that any suffering you cause, you will eventually experience, which seriously is going to decrease the amount of hatred and suffering in the world, because you're just doing it to yourself. What are you but my reflection? Who am I to judge or strike you down, right? It's all just one soul divided that union may come, divided for the sake of union, for the experience. That's all we are. We're just sensory organs of the universe. That's it. And so our job is to create, to marvel in fascination, to love, to experience, to suffer, to die. It's just for the experience. And that's what Adam Weishaupt was trying to do. He wanted to infiltrate the Masons and get rid of the left-hand path and teach create an illuminated world with no religion, no borders, unify the entire planet. It was a good thing. The Illuminati, look at the name. Does that really sound like an organization that is trying to keep you in ignorance and suppress evolution? And no, it's not. And the craziest thing is, I don't think I've ever met a conspiracy theorist that has read Weishaupt's writings. And there's not one illuminated, enlightened, even a little bit intelligent person that would object to anything in Weishaupt's writings. Nothing. But the Christians saw get rid of religion and they went Satan. And now the whole right wing believes that there is this Masonic satanic conspiracy to destroy America and create the kingdom of Satan on earth. And it was literally the opposite, because if anything is an evil satanic influence, it's right-wing Christianity. You can have a different opinion, but your opinion is not based on history. It's not based on you guys, the masks that I posted in my group, if you guys haven't joined it, go take a look at these things. They screw these things into your eyeball to pop your eyeball. And I knew they tortured people, but these were what they tortured the Gnostic heretics with, and it is unbelievable. It's incredible, the cruelty that these people are capable of. And look, there are good things in Christianity, but there is a shit ton of toxic psychology, right? The belief that someone else should suffer for your evil creates a horrifically toxic, a psychological precedent. This is a horrible belief to have. Absolutely horrible. And it's true. The people have taken severely toxic imprints from the influence of this religion. It is way worse than it is good. The damage that it has done to our world. I mean, in the hypocrisy, I was thinking last night about how, they say it's unnatural for people to be transgendered. When did Christians give a fuck about nature? They don't care about animals. Their God gave us to eat them and do whatever we want with them and burn everything down. And global warming is a hoax because Satan wants to stop big oil from being billionaires. It's like they're convinced they're taking down the evil corporations and stuff, but they're actually like propaganda puppets. And I'm telling you guys, the structure of Christianity as it's taught in America is what created the psychological disposition that facilitates using these people as tools. It is what created the capacity for cognitive dissonance, cognitive bias, selective perception, the fundamental evils that I'm always sort of preaching against, right? It's terrible. And we don't need it. We don't need it. Christians, I know plenty of people that are perfectly good people that are not Christian. It's not like you need it. It doesn't give us any real answers. It's been distorted and rewritten so many times. Like, I know a lot of you guys have just tuned in, but watch the beginning where I'm talking about how you can't even get through the first couple of lines of Genesis before you start running into horrifically mangled translations. The idea that the God of the Jews is even male is not Elohim. It's a masculine form of a feminine plural, and also they're so opposed to transgender people. What about the fact that God is also referred to as the Shekinah, the female aspect? The God of the Jews was at least androgynous. And you're going to tell me that people, its creation that's supposed to be its image, can't be androgynous too? Look, this religion is designed to cultivate and maintain ignorance. It is. It may not have originally been that, but that is the effect that it has. And I'm sorry, if you're arguing against that, you're doing more harm than good, and you should stop. We need to confront it, take the goat by the horns, and get rid of it. Get rid of it. I mean, it's important to be polite and respectful, I guess. I fail at this all the time because I have so much anger in regards to it. So much wasted human potential. Such a drag on cultural evolution. So much suffering. And then, as I was saying, the psychological disposition to be able to maintain these ridiculously delusional ideas. The precedent is created in the minds of these people by their belief in Christianity. Sorry, this is true. That's just completely dumb, Oasis. I don't need to be insulting, so I wouldn't suffer to save a little child. I didn't say anything even remotely close to that. Of course I would suffer to save a little child. But the idea that someone else should suffer for your sins is evil. Okay? Somebody once described it to me this way. It's like you have this world where there's this party going on, and everyone's happy. It's a perfect utopia. And there's just this one kid that is kept in a box underneath of this world. And every now and then, everyone jabs a stick in there, and they spit on him, and they call him terrible names. And this goes on for all of eternity. And then everyone else gets to be happy, and it's all dependent on the suffering of this one little child. Would you accept this? People usually say no, and then they say, well, you just denied Christ. Yes, and I'll also trample the cross. Like, of course. I mean, it's that, like that comment, that's completely insane. I didn't say anything that even relates to that at all. I literally was saying the opposite. But that's what people have to do in order to maintain the belief that Christianity is actually good. You have to do these psychological gymnastics in order to evade the actual truth, which is probably the single most destructive spiritual and philosophical tradition, definitely is, ever hit the planet. And the effects of it, the conflict in the United States right now, my country, torn to shreds, primarily because of the influence of Christianity, right-wing Christianity, whatever, American fundamentalist, lunatic Christianity. So, again, I'm not a Satanist, but I think what I'm saying is true and fair, and that it's one of the things, like when you have a sociological or cultural problem, you have to be honest about it, you have to analyze it, and you have to find ways to address it. And either we need to find a way to restructure American Christianity and some of the European, although I think the Europeans are way better than Americans. I mean, look, you guys, I live in South America where there are indigenous people that believe that the plants that have been sacred to them, that they have used for thousands and thousands of years, some of them are starting to think that they're evil. I actually went to, I mean, again, Oasis, that has nothing to do with it. There was war before the Christians, but I have never heard of anything except for Islam, which is connected. You know, it's just a variation of the same religion. People being burned alive in cages and beheaded, and the torture of the Gnostics just for not believing in Jesus, and the oppression. I mean, sure, there was war before the Christians. The chimpanzees. I'm not saying that Christianity is the source of all evil. I am saying that it is the source of more evil than any other single fundamental influence that we can identify. That's a fact. It's an absolute historical fact. And what I was saying is I live in a place where the culture has been completely destroyed because of the influence of Catholicism. These people that had this profound relationship, this deep spirituality with these plant medicines, and I mean, they were diseased and destroyed and murdered by the conquistadors. And then after that, the religious influence of Catholicism separated from their spirituality, and now you have this, you know, in a lot of places here, really bland. It's getting better. People are starting to reconnect with the plant medicines even here, and fighting the influence of Catholicism and getting it out, because it's horrible. It has just made, you know, and look at the influence it has. People don't become more colorful and more interesting and amazing, and they become bland. And miserable usually, and you know, I mean, it's not a good thing. It is just horrible, in my opinion. And historically, I think that the record reflects what I'm saying. You know, burning people alive because they've been accused of witchcraft because they were trying to separate us from real, true spiritual connection. I think that religion in general, but especially American Christianity, actually prevents, not facilitates, genuine spiritual growth, genuine spiritual connection. This is something that should be an individual, organic process based upon your own experiences. You don't get the truth from a book. You don't choose this idea that you choose a doctrine, be it politically, in religion, or any other arena, is just completely insane. Don't be a sheep. Think for yourself. Question authority, right? Think for yourself. Reject any and all religion. You know, I don't even believe entirely in my own experiences, because this doubt makes a wonderful mistress, but a nagging wife, right? I drank and danced all night with doubt, or excuse me, I drank and danced all night with faith, and found a corpse in my arms upon awakening. I drank and danced all night with doubt and found her a virgin in the morning. Right? you don't need to know. I've noticed this is another one of the ways that they sort of prey on people. I think the idea that we don't know where the universe came from, whether or not there's a God, whether or not, and I don't care what your subjective experience is, you don't know for sure whether you're getting reincarnated or not, especially now that we know there's ancestral memory and the possibility that we can just access the collective mind. There's more and more evidence for that. We can entertain possibilities, we can be inclined, but I think absolute belief is just a mistake. It's absolutely a mistake. We have to remain in a receptive state. When your cup, the old Zen thing about the cup's full of water, and then the kid thinks he knows everything, so the Zen master just pours. He's like, you can't pour more water in a cup that's already full. So I think that belief in these dogmatic religions actually precludes genuine spiritual connection. Partly because you already think you know, so you're not going to receive anything. And also, I get some shit because I don't adhere to any tradition in my plant medicine practices. Not that I don't respect them, not that I don't integrate everything I can, because I realize I might not understand something, so it's best to just, err on the side of caution. But when people accept the Bronze Age myth and adhere strictly to the letter, spiritual evolution is killed, it's crushed, it's destroyed, it's impeded. This is a degree of stricture that is not healthy. Everything should grow and evolve. This idea, when God is thought to be dead by the people that worship him, apparently. I've never understood why it is that evolution and creation, like the idea that there is some kind of God or intelligence or something other than blind matter, right? That it's not just a bunch of random chaos and gobbledygook that happened to animate itself somehow. I mean, to me, that's always just sounded so stupid. Like, of course I believe in evolution, but random mutations, this level of complexity, Darwin himself said that was impossible, right? Obviously that's not right. But the idea that evolution somehow threatens the idea that there could be some sort of intelligence, some sort of spiritual, that is just completely stupid. Like, why? You can't have both? Like, it's not a work in progress? That's how I've always thought of it since I was a child. Of course there's evolution. And of course there's also some kind of intelligence imbued in nature. It's really obvious, So I think that both, like, atheistic programming and in the same way that religious people are capable of developing these delusions and selective perception based on doctrine, science does it as well. They have these massive blind spots that they, it's like they have to be there in order for them to, they impose them with their expectations, right? I'll give you an example. The other day, I was reading about this experiment that the physicist was doing, and it was about this idea that consciousness somehow influences the observer effect, right? That consciousness influences the collapse of a probability wave. And in the New Age movement and stuff, you guys, they act like this is absolutely proven, and it's definitely not. There's a lot of conflict in regards to whether or not it's real, and so. This physicist said, I want to take the woo out of this. There's no way we want to take the mysticism out of physics. So if the experiment is that you're trying to determine if your expectations influence the result of the behavior of a subatomic particle, and you expect to find a negative result, if it's true, you're going to find a negative result. So it's this kind of stuff that it's like, what? That guy's precluded from participation. It's just like that guy can't do that experiment. It has to be someone that's open and objective. Would you have to embody the full archetype then, since we never understand? Well, that's the interesting thing about the tarot. I mean, I've never been really much of one for the tarot, although I've seen some strange things in regard to it. And people like Crowley, and who was the guy that did the Holy Mountain? Said kind of about everything that I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes. Jesus comes and destroys all the natives. The Holy Mountain, that guy, you can find it on YouTube. Jodorowsky, Alejandro Jodorowsky. Holy Mountain it's low budget, man, but it is amazing movie. I love that movie. But he explains how the tarot can be thought of as just like a archetypal map of our psychology and our soul, our being, and it can be truly extraordinary. And I think that for myself, for my particular archetype, uh, what blew my mind when I read Crowley's Book of Thoth was that I could see my process in my life from zero, the Fool, to one, to like I had been through all the cards of the tarot in my process. And I mean, so you're saying we have to embody the Fool because we never understand? I mean, to an extent, I guess. We do understand. I'm not saying that knowledge isn't exactly possible. I'm just saying that we have to remain in a fluid state if we really want to ascend in consciousness. Once you have, there's a reason why belief system and bullshit both have the same abbreviation. It's the same thing. So it's one thing to contemplate. It's one thing to be open to possibilities, but you don't want to abandon skepticism, and you don't want to collapse your probability wave with certainty, because then growth stops. So okay, it's been almost 2 hours. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I think it's really some of the best of what I had to offer. It's unfortunate there are more of you now, I think, than there have been. But one thing about the tree of knowledge: what if it was not knowledge that caused the fall, but the ignorance of thinking that you know? I don't know, Holy Sprite, if you've been here for the when I got into the metaphysics of the Gnostic Lucifer idea as a process, that that it was actually awareness that caused division in the original nothingness, because once you had two things, you had introduced division. And according to this school of mystical thought, it was the awareness consciousness itself, or knowledge, that caused the energetic process that resulted in the development of the universe. And that this rebellion against nothingness, any will, and you guys know that maybe that, in Crowley's system and the left-hand path, will is like the thing. I mean, a Satanist basically worships will. And so, yeah, I mean, the misapplication, walk with knowledge wisely, sure. But I think the illustration that I gave of how the serpent was telling the truth, and that when they ate of the tree of knowledge, they knew as Elohim knew, indicates that it wasn't some sort of egoic distortion of real knowledge, that it was actually access to some higher kind of consciousness, or at least that seems to be what is being presented, particularly if you are able to read the book of Genesis in the original Hebrew. So does anybody else have any questions? Was that Zavort G&K calling me Illuminati? I mean, sure. Illuminati just means illuminated ones. And I mean, I'm trying, I hope I'm illuminated. And again, if you're just tuning in, I don't think the Illuminati were evil at all. And you guys can just Google Adam Weishaupt's writings and read them for yourself. And this idea that you want to know who the real Illuminati is, I'll tell you, it's a Christian group, a right-wing Christian group called the Family. That we know who the leader is. There was a documentary on Netflix about it, and it's really, really obvious. If you want to, you trace everything back to the influences just using reason. You'll see that the military-industrial complex, big oil, and right-wing Christians are manipulating both sides of the aisle in the United States. They've basically taken over, and that's why we have, Biden, right-wing Christian, pro-prison, racist lunatic, versus fake Christian, manipulating psychopath Donald Trump. It's it's the Family. It's not the Illuminati. The Illuminati is what was trying to stop the family, to try to get rid of the religion, the negative influence of religion, and really try to unify humanity and get rid of borders. And the New World Order that everyone is so afraid of was actually an attempt to unify the planet and to get rid of these negative influences. At least that's my take on it. And that comes from, you guys, all these conspiracy theorists, like I said, it's insane. None of them have read Morals and Dogma. You would think this is a previously secret book of Masons. You'd think that if you want to know what they think, you would just like read what the highest ranking Mason ever in the history of the United States, or at least the publicly known, what he had written for other Freemasons. You'd think you'd read that if you were really curious about what they thought, or go and join a lodge like I did. And then also people that are so convinced they know what the Illuminati are, but not one of them that I've ever encountered has just read Adam Weissel's papers. It just blows my mind that people will develop an opinion so strongly and resolutely when they have no knowledge at all of the subject from any credible source, none. And this has actually created like movements based on some jackass's idea. Like Alex Jones, I used to think, he used to say amazing things like way back in the day. I think both him and David Icke, they just kind of ran out of real stuff, so they started making shit up. Back in the day, Alex Jones used to say some really inspiring stuff, but now when I hear him talk, all I hear is, "I'm Alex Jones and I'm a big fat dumbass. Blah, 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 blah. The COVID toothpaste will save your life." It's like, dude, really? And he got busted for DUI a little while ago. Before you go trying to save the world, make sure your house is in order. And if you really cared so much about protecting and saving people, you wouldn't be driving around drunk. That's full of shit. And of course, he's another one of those kind of right-wing Trump supporter dumbasses. Is there anything else, you guys? Any more questions or anything before we wrap it up? Because I'm already an hour late for this party. It's just such an interesting topic. And, I know I was really brutal on Christianity, and I just don't care anymore. I mean, they've never spared me. I've been just for genuinely trying to help and expand consciousness and opposing these negative influences. People have tried to kill me. They've tried to kill me, and it's like I said earlier, it's been going on my whole life. I think we need to stand up to this stuff, and again, I'm trying to be clear that there's nothing directly in the teachings of Jesus that I'm in opposition to, but the way that it has been taught in the United States has destroyed the United States. It's the reason for the collapse of the empire along with unchecked capitalism. So, trying to think if there's anything else that I could possibly. I didn't really mention the Kabbalion, but it's almost got nothing to do with this, except that I will share this one quick story. When I was trying to do, research much earlier in my life on this stuff, I came across the Kabbalion mentioned in a book of suggested reading for Aleister Crowley students, and I said, I would like to find a copy of this. Man, it's probably sitting right here somewhere. I don't know, maybe it's upstairs. So I said to my girlfriend, we should, oh man, I want to get my hands on that book. And I didn't really even know why. And the next day we were in a town of 300 people on the coast of California called Mendocino, not the county, but the actual town, which is really tiny. I think that's peak 300. And so I went into a used bookstore, and I found an 81-year-old, the day after I said I want to find this book, 81-year-old mint condition copy of the Kabbalion. Actually, I didn't find it. My girlfriend pulled it off the shelf, and she said, is this the book you were looking for? And I didn't believe it. I was like looking around like, man, are there like, the secret chiefs following me around and planting stuff or something? Like, what is this? And so we went to the cabin that we had rented, and we ate some acid, and I just said out loud, I don't even know why I did this. I said, what does Lucifer really have to do with all this stuff? And I flipped the book open, and I'm looking at Lucifer, the word. I turn the book around. My girlfriend sees it and vomits because it was just like too much, and I'm leaving a lot out. There had been a series long chain of stuff this weird that had been happening. So I think the combination of acid and something that incredibly improbable happening, she just vomited. And so I turned it around and read the line, and later I checked. It's the only time that name appears in the book, too, and I flipped right to it.
They said Lucifer and the other fallen angels have some reality to them, as any good occultist knows. And so that was an incredible thing. I definitely, somebody asked me earlier, is why I'm mentioning a good book to start with the occult, and the Kybalion is an extraordinary little book. Very plain, easy to understand. And once I think the most incredible thing about it is that when you read it, you realize that everyone knows this stuff. And Terence McKenna once said, if the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed. And Timothy Leary, speaking of psychedelic prophets or whatever, he also said that we could remember all the way back to the Big Bang and maybe even beyond that the memory is in everything. And of course, there are theories in physics about that now that suggest that every exchange of energy is actually recorded. I think it's called the 0-point field, which would suggest that that is quite literally the case. So if there are no further questions, anybody? Okay, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. I'm doing a secret stream on the Kybalion tomorrow for patrons only. So if you would like to be a part of that, click the link in the description. And I said I was going to never do another political thing ever again, but on Tuesday, I actually am going to talk about this again. I'm going to do like a sequel to the last live stream because there's so much I didn't say that I think is worthy of discussion. So thank you guys so much. Be safe. Happy Hell-o-ween. And, you know, the truth. We have to forget about doctrinal religion, move out of the shadow of history, ask Jesus to jump down off the cross so we can nail the next fool martyr, you know. All right, I love you guys. Good night. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.